What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video. And today we're bringing back our friend Devin Jackson on the show for a 2025 NFL mock draft. Devin, feel free to say hi to the people. If you guys are new as well, feel free to join the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me back on again this year, man. Had a lot of fun last year when
Right.
we did our first mock. And I think it was this time of the year last year. It's kind of like things are starting to materialize a little bit.
Right.
Players are looking like you thought they were or weren't. So it's
Yeah.
kind of cool to like go back and check out and see some of these players where they stand. At this point of the year as we get ready for the next few months and get ready for the college football playoff here. So.
Dude, it's going to be hype, especially it's 12 team this year too, correct?
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's gonna be insane.
SMU is playing Pittsburgh this weekend. I'm right now, my girlfriend's like, oh, we got tickets to go see Baylor TCU, and that's like a big game for him. But I also have a media ticket to go see SMU Pitt. And I'm like, ooh, that's going to be a tough one. But regardless, it's going to be a fun weekend. But let's get into this. You said you wanted the second overall pick, which I am perfectly fine with because I get the most criticism for the second overall pick. So I thank you for that, Titans fans. You can go after Devin. He's not going to see all the comments, so I'll be able to respond for him. But at the number one overall selection for the Carolina Panthers, I want to hear your thought process about this because for me, when I approach the number one pick, I look at Travis Hunter, but I do think a dark horse move is to look at that edge rushing position because there's a lot of really talented edge rushers in this class. For me, Abdul Carter is the front runner for the guy to be most likely selected at number one if they're going to go after that position. Besides that, I'm a big James Pierce fan, but we can also talk about the frame. What are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, I think you got to go. Obviously, you need premium positions,
Right.
especially in a situation like Carolina where they just need guys that are dudes. Like it's been pretty apparent. I mean, we knew going to the year there's going to get tough sledding for them. They obviously threw a lot of money into the offensive line, and it's been up and down this year. And then obviously the benching, and then bringing back Bryce Young. You don't want to put another quarterback in that situation right now. I think it's already messy as is.
Right.
And then you look at receiver, you certainly would help, which would make a lot of sense if you wanted to go after a guy like Travis Hunter,
Mhm.
say with DB. But I feel like edge rusher makes a lot of sense
Right.
as a top pick, just because there are a few premium guys at the top of the board.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of a little bit of a projection, but it seems like right now, at least Abdul Carter is a front runner and
Right.
has the athleticism, the speed, pass rushing ability uh, to win. I just think it makes a lot of sense to go after
Yeah.
edge here, considering where they are right now and the resources Carolina has poured into.
Well, I mean, I love that idea. I always go after Travis, but I mean, talk about the progression of Abdul Carter transitioning from a pure linebacker role that had some form of edge rushing reps. And for me, I was higher on him than some of the people I knew around me, but not as high as those who actually like really did project what he could be. And he's probably blown out those projections as well. He's done a fantastic job. It's honestly remarkable how well and how quickly he's developed. So, you know what? I'll roll the dice. I'll give you the easy pick at 2 then and go after Abdul Carter. I won't put you in a sticky situation.
Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, Abdul Carter at one, it would just be crazy to see, his progression and where he
Right.
was. I mean, even last year, I know everyone, kind of had that thought that, okay, this is definitely a dude, watching like Chop Robinson and Adisa
Mhm.
Isaac and that defense last year, but you just weren't sure, like, is he going to stay at the second level? Is he going to move up to edge rusher? And they mostly use him at edge rusher. He's still, in some off ball looks,
Sure.
kind of design pressures to get him one on one opportunities, but definitely a guy that you can see being an outside backer at the NFL level.
For sure.
Um, Second pick, obviously for me, is this is easy. I'm running the card in with Travis Hunter. Now I think it gets interesting to see what do they do with him. Like
Right.
are they going to put him as full time receiver, or are they going to put him at defensive back? I still really like his film at defensive back. I think he does some great things at receiver,
Yep.
and obviously will have a more immediate impact on the offense at the very least
Sure.
as a receiver. But I could see him being a guy that gets 7-8 interceptions as a rookie, just because
Mm.
how talented he is and being able to close on passes from zone coverage. What he's been able to do in man coverage this year too.
Mhm.
So I think it'll be interesting to see what exactly teams want to do with him. But I think just from a talent perspective, you get good guys in the building and you kind of figure out the rest. And I can see him sticking that receiver just with how much Tennessee has had some uncertainty there.
Yeah.
Obviously, they traded away DeAndre Hopkins and Traylon Burks hasn't been the guy for them. So I could definitely see him sticking out a receiver in Tennessee.
Man, imagine because obviously Traylon Burks was comped to AJ Brown essentially, especially now when you look at it in retrospect with AJ Brown being part of the whole entire reason they selected Traylon Burks. I was talking to my buddy who is an Eagles fan, and I know you are as well. What would you think of like do you think Traylon Burks would have had a more successful career if he ended up going into the AJ Brown role for the Eagles? Let's just say the trade never happened and Philly's like, you know what? We're going to stick and pick. We're going to take Traylon to play the role that AJ Brown's trying to play today. Obviously, it's not going to be a 1-to-1 because AJ, there's an obvious talent gap there. But do you think Traylon actually still could have been relatively competitive, or maybe he might have had a similar career trajectory?
Yeah, it's tough to say just because like he's also dealt with some injuries and just
Right.
being banged up. He
Yeah.
just it took him a while to really find himself in the offense. But I also think the coaching part, changing coaches and
Right.
changing offensive systems, it's tough, and you think about AJ Brown and what he's been able to do. They don't make it difficult for him. They
Right.
let him get the ball in space and do his thing, win one-on-one matchups. And obviously he's a really great route runner as well. But he's just a strong player that is hard to guard one on one. Like
Yeah.
he's gonna win those 50-50 battles more times than not. And I think the thing with Traylon Burks is we could recognize the size and the athleticism, but I do think coming from the college level, he did have some issues with winning those one-on-one contested catches all the time.
Mm.
He didn't always play to his frame. So I think it's a little bit of both where like sure, like you could see, maybe if he was a little more consistent in those one-on-one situations, you could see a path where has a AJ Brown like impact. But I just think
Right.
the injuries combined, the change of offensive systems, and just some inconsistencies in those one-on-one situations, you see more flashes than consistent play with him.
Of course. I mean, obviously, no one will be able to play like AJ Brown has been on the Eagles. It's been honestly remarkable about the fact that he only was that 18th overall selection, I believe. So, obviously, a great trade by Philly. You could tell how pissed off the whole entire organization was when they ended up trading away AJ Brown. But Travis Hunter as well. I love the fact that he's going into a Brian Callahan system where he also can play. I think you might agree with this almost like a Tyler Boyd role. Extremely consistent, very fluid player, just someone that you can always rely on in the short range, but also one that is just someone who could be able to be sneakily dangerous in the middle and even the deep threat range.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
All right, let's move on here. I spent a billion years asking you questions about the freaking Eagles and the Titans. For the Patriots, I think the biggest position to address is that left tackle spot. I mean, I know that my Patriots fans of the show who they lament their left tackle position. And to be fair, as a Steelers fan, I dealt with Chakuma Okorafor. So when he came out starting in the year, it's like, okay, I understand that. But I would say that Will Campbell, to me, I want to hear your thoughts on him because I know you also love offensive line. You're the one who brought up Karan Amagaji last year out of nowhere. No one knew his name all of a sudden. Well, he's taking snaps on Sunday. But, for me, Will Campbell, I think he has the best talent. I know a lot of people love Kelvin Banks. I'm not fully there on Kelvin Banks. I want to be. But again, even Kelvin Banks has his questions whether he can be a true tackle. Will Campbell, arm length, Kelvin Banks, talk about that 6'4" frame. Like, do you have a solidified left tackle one with one of these guys, or are you considering them hybrid and someone else is actually going to be that first guy who you considered a true left tackle?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation. I want him at left tackle just because I've been able to see him do it. I do think his lack of length is going to come up in a draft process, and as it
Right.
should. We've seen guys of his skill set kind of be highly discussed as an interior offensive lineman or tackle. But if he's getting taken by the Patriots, I think they're taking him as a left tackle.
Yeah.
Just personally, I just think you need stability. Even if you take some lumps early with Will Campbell, he has an anchor and has ability to recover and really the lower body flexibility to
Mm,
handle some of what edge rushers are throwing at him.
yeah,
From an offensive line perspective, his tape is like, I would say definitely a couple steps ahead, of guys like Kelvin Banks and,
mm,
obviously Cam Williams. I know he's gotten a lot of hype. Ariante Ursery as well.
right,
But I think when you look at the tackle position, I think it's Will Campbell and everybody else. He
yeah,
just that good. It just depends on the team, who takes him and where they want to utilize him. I think he could be, a high caliber guard, but I
yeah,
look at what he can do at tackle and how well he moves, and his ability to block in the run game. I think that's been kind of an undersold part of his game
for
is
sure,
he can move bodies, especially one-on-one situations
yeah,
as a run blocker. I think obviously you want to see him be a little bit more consistent pad level wise because I think sometimes
sure,
he plays a little high. But
he
I,
does,
I think when you look at the offensive line class and kind of the drop off you start to see after the first few guys at offensive tackle, you better get one early or you're going to be stuck with a guy, maybe a little bit more of a developmental guy, uh, you know, pretty much after round one, I would say.
yeah, and I mean, I think you'll agree to this. It's almost an amazing trait that Will Campbell has the anchor he does for how high his pad level is. Most of the time, when guys are that tall, they get sat on their tush 24/7 because, well, physics. But the fact that Will Campbell, even with the pad level issues, having that anchor, you can almost imagine that theoretically, logically speaking, if you get him to have a better pad level, his anchor might even be more improved. So definitely agree with that one. I'm curious, when Josh Simmons was healthy, how did you evaluate him compared to Will Campbell? Because to me, both those guys were I was a Josh Simmons questioner at the start of the year, but I ended up becoming a big fan. I know that you love offensive line. Did you end up starting falling in love with him as well?
Yeah, he was a guy that I think, if you were looking for just a true tackle, he probably the first one off the board
Yeah.
as a true tackle, and undoubtedly. I
Yeah.
thought he's had such a great start to the season.
Mhm.
Really made some leaps in terms of run blocking, and then became a more consistent and toolsy pass protector. I think he did some nice things with his hands, being able to kind of obviously sort, twists and games up front,
Yep.
but I think he continued to progress game by game. Seemed like he was getting better, and he had an awesome start to that Oregon game before he went down with the injury. I mean, he cleared away for a big Travion Henderson run, and then you saw the impact without him in the lineup. How State struggled, especially
Mhm.
on that left side of the line. So he brought stability, consistency, and as a guy that you started to see some flashes with him last year. Started to put it together towards the end of the year, but really went in and improved in the offseason. And I think he's a guy that, even though he's going to be hurt, I could still see him being a mid first round pick,
For
even
sure.
with some injuries and whatnot.
Yeah.
Especially if he's able to get back in the draft process and do some things
Yeah.
testing wise.
All right. What do you want to do for the Jets?
This one's tough, man.
Mm,
Especially after watching that game last night.
mm,
It's just like it's clear that they have a lot of issues, but like if they can, start to get some consistency and some production from people, I think it makes a lot of sense. I can't see them, going quarterback. I know
right.
like obviously Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play for 3-4 more years. He probably has a few more left, but
Mm,
I just can't see them right now, just the way that there are, the kind of uncertainty of who's going to be the head coach next year. A lot of things to iron out. So if I
right.
had to guess right now, I think they're going a defensive player,
Mm,
and I will go Will Johnson here. Looking at their contract situation right now, DJ Reed's in the final year of a 3-year deal,
okay.
and they Sauce has not been as dominant as he was in his first couple seasons. I'll be the first one to admit that, but I still think they have something with him, and still have a, top 10 to 15 corner in Sauce. So I think you pair him with Will Johnson and you continue to keep, a premium secondary, start to look at some safety options and free agency potentially too, or dipping in the draft.
Yeah.
They really need to remake that secondary a little bit, for sure. I think
Yeah.
defensive line wise, they're in a much better situation. Javon Kinlaw's playing some great football
He showed
with
up
the
last
Jets,
night.
obviously alongside Quinn Williams. But
Mhm.
I think you go DB there and get Will Johnson, get the best DB on the board, and get a guy that can be an immediate contributor as you continue to try and widen that, that kind of that time period where you're trying to be a competitive team.
Sure. All right. Well, that made my job a lot harder because that was my dream pick for the Jaguars. Whenever I have trade mock drafts, which I have one going on right now, and I have to film the rest of it today, but I ended up trading up with the Jaguars to number 3 overall to end up selecting Will Johnson to jump the Jets because I was like, that's my dream pick for him. And it actually mentions like I'm mentioning both for Josh Simmons as well as Sauce Gardner when in college you saw the absence of their presence, you can really see the value that someone has on a team. Like I remember Sauce was gone in I think a bowl game of theirs the season before he came out, and it was just almost an utter nightmare for Cincinnati. But very similarly, you look at Ohio State's left tackle situation. Instantly, it goes from Josh Simmons being essentially the top graded offensive lineman to having the new left tackle being the bottom, and it just you see that gap right there. So it almost gives more certainty to the talent of Josh Simmons. It sucks that he's out for the year, but sitting here with the Jaguars at number 5, I was trying to stall to be able to survive a little bit here. I'm actually going to go because they have that flexibility on the offensive line to be able to potentially take like an ouch pick in case that the tackle doesn't work. You know what? I'm going to take a questionable roll of the dice. Balky's not afraid of going after very bold decisions. I'm going to go Ariante Ursary here. I don't have him graded as a top 10 pick. However, I also believe that he could be an asset in the short term as a guard as he continues to polish up as a pass blocker because he's done such a great job in college. But again, you go to that next level to the NFL. We've seen the fact that he can progress year to year as a pass blocker. And I think that you either roll with him or else you end up, at least kicking him to guard and just trusting the development cycle. But he's a great athlete. He's a powerful blocker. And I think that those two things in the offseason are something that people fall in love with more than just pure technicality.
Yeah, especially with obviously the uncertainty around Josh Simmons, that
Yeah.
he could have easily gone in that kind of top 5 range,
Mhm.
the way the trajectory he was on. But
Right.
Ursary has been really good this year. I thought he's taken a next step as a blocker and really has that game to game consistency that you look for. So definitely a little earlier than I thought I would have thought for Ursary, but I don't hate the selection. I think he's a guy that, like you said, has
Right.
some guard tackle flexibility potentially, and
Yeah.
uh, man, Jaguars just need some dudes on the offensive line
They do.
that can protect Trevor Lawrence. So I'm all for it.
Yep.
Here, another kind of pick that I'm running in the card in. I got to take Mason Graham here for New
Mm.
Orleans at 6. Obviously, they have Brian Brisset and what he's been able to do at times for New Orleans, but they are a team that likes to build in the trenches and likes to really rebuild and continue to as they start to get towards an era where Cam Jordan's probably gone the next year or so. New Orleans, they need more
Right.
bodies and capable guys of pass rushing too on in third down situations. I could see they can get really creative with how they use Mason Graham and Brian Brisset. So selfishly, this is like a pick that you know Saints probably have other needs they need to address, but obviously you don't want to go, interior lineman here in the top 10. So I think, getting Mason Graham, one of the best players in this class, a guy that, you know, may not be your typical, top 10 size defensive lineman, but
Right.
he's just so damn slippery and hard to block. And he's a guy that you just get in the building and he's gonna really shine on that Saints defensive line. So I really like the pairing of Brisset
Yeah.
and Graham for years to come in New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, defensive interior pressure is very, very underrated. I don't think that it gets enough credit because people talk about the like almost when you talk about good defensive interior, it's almost as if they mention it with running backs as like the lowest valued positions. Like, oh yeah, it's just another defensive interior. It's like no, no. I mean, we saw what happens with obviously this is an extreme like polar like example here, but Aaron Donald. You saw what happens when you have that instant interior pressure. It's almost more dangerous than having that instant edge pressure because you can't step up. You got to roll out. And when you have interior pressure. So I do love that. to death. I will say about the Ursary pick, it's definitely early. I have Josh Simmons significantly higher, but I do think that when you factor in how much Jacksonville historically has loved the athletes and has been willing to reach even though we don't agree, I wanted to roll the dice on something unique. So I do agree with you there. But for the Raiders, I think we both can agree on this. They're going to go after a quarterback. And the question is, do they go after the Daddy Sanders connection, Shedeur at this point, or do they go Cam Ward? I'm curious what your thoughts on this, because for me, I go after QB1 for me, which is Cam Ward. But again, you can also factor in Shedeur Sanders into the situation.
Yeah, I think about Las Vegas, and I think that for them, they just need a playmaker, a quarterback. I feel like we've seen them try to have kind of a distributor type of quarterback, a guy that can just feed the guy, feed guys footballs.
Right.
I mean, they had Jimmy Garoppolo start, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew over the last few years. I think they just need a guy that can go and make a play on 3rd and 12. A guy that, even though you don't have, maybe the top flight receiver room, you can still make something happen. And so I think for that reason, and selfishly, because I, obviously I want Shedeur for my next pick, but
Ooh.
with Cam Ward, I think you're going to get some lumps, and to me, I think it really depends on, do the Raiders see themselves as a organization that can quickly rebuild, or are they
Right.
in it for the long haul? So I think
Right.
if it's the latter, I think Cam Ward makes a lot of sense.
Let's roll the dice on some Cam Award love here. Mainly because I'm going to be nice and allow you to go after what you want to select because you didn't tear me apart for Ursary.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Shedeur here in Cleveland. They it's clear like Deshaun Watson is not their guy,
Right.
moving forward, and Jameis is a nice stopgap for now, but they need to get the position right,
Right.
and I think you quickly saw like what it could be. I mean, even with a game of Jameis Winston in there, if you run the offense at a high level and efficient and getting the ball out quickly and making the correct reads, and I think that's what Shedeur brings you, and taking him. Like, obviously, tackle is a spot that could have been a pick there. Could
Sure.
have upgraded the receiver room, obviously, too, in Cleveland, but I think you want to get the quarterback right and kind of figure everything else out. And I think getting in Shedeur, if you still have Jameis on a roster, you don't have to force him into the fire immediately. Give him some more time to get familiarized and really get comfortable with Stefanski's offensive system. But
Right.
I can't think of a better combo between Stefanski and Shedeur Sanders with what his skill set brings and
Yeah.
uh, who he is as a player.
Well, I think that's actually very interesting that you're talking about the acclimation to a new system. I mean, Shedeur for his entire college career, back even at Jackson State, who was his coach? Prime. Like he's been dealing with a very similar system for the majority of time he's been in college, right? So I do think it's actually really good to at least have that time for him to acclimate to a new environment, to a whole entire new system. And it's not a knock on Shedeur at all. It's just what happens when you're kind of, used to one thing. And then, well, this is going to be a whole new system for you in a whole new league. Definitely like the idea there. For the Dolphins, I'm curious what you think about this. Dream wise, again, I want to be able to emphasize that I would just take Kelvin Banks in a heartbeat here. Like, I just don't know if the organization is a massive fan of taking offensive line early, which I know they're not. They have like one of the quickest times to throw. So they just don't really value the excellence on the offensive line. They more so value competence. I would say that the next position I would look at would be defensive interior with someone who's a little bit freaky like Kenneth Grant, maybe not as statistically as talented as Mason Graham, but again, we're talking about teams that get excited about the future here, and one that took Chop Robinson in the first round because he was a very raw player with a freak athleticism background. But also Malachi Starks. Those are the two guys I'm looking at. Who else would you toss in that list, if any?
Yeah, for the Dolphins, it's tough just because like where are they trying to go? Like I feel
Right.
like they're kind of stuck right now in neutral. Like they're kind of a team that is still trying to figure out who they are.
Right.
So yeah, this one's a tough one.
It's more tough.
I probably lean I probably lean go, dipping into the offensive line class potentially.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing is, if it's solely what I would do, which honestly, this is a mock draft between two of us. We can go with what I want to do. You know what? Fuck the Dolphins. We're going after Kelvin Banks. Screw it. He can be both either a guard or a tackle if need be. If Patrick Paul doesn't work out, I like the fact that there is a flexibility there. Screw the Dolphins front office, man. We're gonna do it ourselves.
Yeah, it's
It's
I,
just
I
screw
think
'em, man.
I think it takes some time for sure to figure out like
Right.
you try to do all like this process elimination for teams and like, oh well, this guy isn't going to be there next year, or
Right.
they don't typically go after these guys. But I mean, we're so far away from
Of course.
trying to get it all right. But yeah, I could see the fit for Kelvin Banks. Um, they again another team that just needs dudes on the offensive line
Yeah.
to be able to protect and have some consistency. I think Banks, for the most part of his game, he's a pretty consistent player.
Yeah.
Like obviously that Georgia game wasn't great, and it wasn't great for either him or Cam Williams, but
Yeah. He had
there
some
was still
trouble.
some good in that game. So I think with
Sure.
Kelvin Banks, you're getting a guy that, uh, you know, if you can get him to continue to be consistent as a blocker, especially in pass protection situations, and get him to improve,
Yep.
I think you got a really good player there. So,
For
uh,
sure.
Giants, they got to get a quarterback,
They do.
number one, and I think Milrow makes a lot of sense here. Though I
Oh.
do think that I could see a path of him returning just because
Yeah.
he's really struggled over the last few games.
Right.
Consistency, seeing things downfield, and being able to make quick reads and get the football in his hands, not hold on to it too long.
Mhm.
Um, and I know the push from Garrett Nussmeier has been strong lately. I think we'll probably end up talking about him later, but I
Okay.
think Milrow, I think right now I feel comfortable in taking him, knowing that they can't move on from Daniel Jones right now.
Mm.
Have a situation where you can kind of ease him in,
Sure.
but yeah, I think it's obvious that Daniel Jones is not their franchise guy.
Right. So, you're sold on Milrow?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'm a big Drew Aller guy. I know. It
See,
sounds
I
crazy.
no, it's so hard for like with Alar because he's going first round if he declares. Like you just know it,
He's
right?
just the
But
arm talent's jaw-dropping. In the offseason, you just know that's going to accelerate his stock.
I could see a wild card there. No, hear me out. I could see a wild card in him being in play for Cleveland because he
Ooh.
feels like an AFC North quarterback, right?
He
Like,
does, doesn't he,
yeah,
dude?
like a
Yeah, he
like
does.
obviously, people look at Big Ben and kind of give the comp body wise, but like
Right.
he just feels like a guy that play action, turn around and rips 20 yards down the field. Like that's
Right.
the type of guy he is. And I could see Stefanski uh fall in love with a guy like that. So
I'd
I
hate
think he
that.
could be in play at 8 there, especially
Yeah.
like, let's say Shedeur, goes
Right. To the
to
Raiders.
Las Vegas instead. Then I think it gets interesting in
Mm.
what he could do or what he could be. So I think obviously if he plays this weekend, it'll obviously be big for his stock
Oh, yeah.
against Ohio State. But
Yeah.
I mean, before he got injured against Wisconsin,
He did well.
honestly, it was his best game I've
Yeah.
ever seen of him.
Yeah.
Like he was really good.
Yeah. So 2 things. 1, I'd hate that as a Steelers fan because that's my dream pick to the Steelers is Drew Allar. People know that. Everybody knows I love him. But I was also a hater of Drew. Ended up being QB 17 at the start of the year. Man, the progression is ridiculous. Dude's been fantastic. But the second thing you ended up mentioning in there that you said if he comes out, he will be a first. Are you thinking that he could end up returning, trying to be like a top 3 pick with Arch Manning being essentially 1 next year? Or is it just more so let's feel it out?
I think it's more of feel it out, but he feels like a guy that wants to win at the college level, like
Mm,
that kind
he's
of
20.
competitive. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
he's
20.
young.
That's
I
young.
mean, like we had the same conversation about Olu, Like
Mm,
there's a guy that could have came out early but ended up staying, and
right.
obviously still ended up going first round.
Right.
Um, but yeah, there's something I would have to say that Penn State guys they want to really win
Yeah.
and win a championship. So I could see that weighing in on Allard potentially staying, but
Okay.
I think he's probably leaning more towards declaring because I mean he's a first rounder I think automatically. So
Right. We thought the same about Olu, to be fair. I remember the year before, it's like, man, this guy's a lock top 10. He's like, I'm going back to school. I'm like, what? It's like, what the hell? And then he still ends up going top 10 in a loaded tackle class. So good on him for that. But for the Bengals, I'm between two players. Malachi Starks, Geno Stone hasn't been necessarily jaw dropping. I think that they still miss Jesse Bates. And then Kenneth Grant. You get instant chemistry there with Chris Jenkins. Technically, I mean, it kind of is more so Kenneth Grant and not Will Campbell, but Mason Graham. I don't know why the hell I thought Will Campbell. I just thought of a white dude, but Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant more so have that connection, but obviously had the same defensive interior room last year that they were in. And then again, has that freaky, punchy build. I assume based on the conversation we've had that you're not necessarily fully sold on Kenneth Grant being a top 15 talent, but maybe like the raw talent can push him there. I assume that's like what your mindset is.
yeah, he's a guy right now I think is a lot more flash than down to down consistency play.
Agreed.
I think he can get there for sure, but
Sure.
I think you have to be careful with defensive tackles just because not only you're trying to project them where they're going to be, but where they are best at the NFL level.
Mm,
And is he a true nose? Is he, like a upfield,
right.
one tech, three tech? Like
Hmm.
what is he exactly? And it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to know because of what Mason Graham does next to him.
Right.
And he just plays so damn well and commands so much attention. But certainly
It's
with
true.
Grant, when he gets one-on-one situations, he does
He
pretty good
does.
job. So I think with Grant, more of a projection right now, but I could
Sure.
certainly get there with him.
I'm like considering Nick Scorton here as well. It fits the exact edge profile that Cincinnati stereotypically looks for. It'll keep a high value position with a young player for an extended period of time as well. So, what are your thoughts between going after Nick Scorton and Malachi Starks in this situation?
Yeah, I was just pulling up the Bengals depth chart
Yep.
here. I think it's tough to say because they poured in some
I mean,
resources
they
into
have
the
a
edge.
former first round pick
Yeah,
still that hasn't
yeah.
really been
Miles
able to,
Murphy. Yeah,
yeah,
he still hasn't really
had a
uh
chance.
yeah.
But
But I also look at the safety room and
they have some dudes,
yeah, they have
but
some good players, I would say.
it's more, I would
But
say,
I
competence
would
than talent
say Starks certainly puts them in a
ahead.
much better position.
Let's
Uh
roll with it. I did it this week anyways, so I'm perfectly fine with it. Let's go Malachi Starks.
yeah, we just know he's going to be a guy that doesn't get as valued as highly at the NFL level just because they don't value safety as much here.
It's a shame.
Um, but I've heard that teams are starting to realize that you've got to have a guy that can do a couple different things as a safety. I
For
think
sure.
before it was like they wanted to evaluate guys that were just ball hawks or
Mhm.
playmakers, but
Right.
you got to have guys that are consistent on the back end
Mhm.
making tackles, can fit the
Right.
run game, can tackle on space. I think Malachi brings all that to you, and just because like he's been in the limelight since a freshman. Everyone kind of gets that prospect fatigue, but he should absolutely be a top 15 pick.
Okay. You got the Rams, man.
This one's hard because like I would just want to run in the car and say, what, just get Josh Simmons because I feel like he's an
Hear that.
immediate upgrade for what they need on that offensive line.
Okay.
As you continue to try and extend Matthew Stafford's
Mhm.
elite play.
Yep.
Um,
I'm
but
waiting for the
I
flip.
also look at corner and it's like
Mhm.
it's very enticing because like this I mean the corner class is good, but the next person come off the list, like who's gonna be the next
Right.
player, right? And because like Benjamin Morrison is fine, but I'm not comfortable taking him there.
with his hip
Savon
injury and such.
Ravel, I would feel comfortable taking had he not suffered a season-ending injury. So those
Right.
are always tough to gauge.
Both
So I'm
of
gonna
them.
go Josh Simmons here, just because I don't think I'm quite ready to make the next corner pick here, and I think he's a guy that when healthy, I think he's a plug and play starter. So
Right.
especially with the Rams, and they've been able to patchwork their offensive line, but I think it's time to get a guy that can solidify your left tackle spot.
Okay. For the Cowboys, I'm going to be going after Walter Nolan. Come on, man. You're supposed to stop me and say Ashton
Yeah,
Jetty. That was a
I
test.
was like Walter. No,
That was a test.
that
Come
was
on, man.
rich. That was rich.
Oh no, we're going Ashton Jetty. Come on. There's no debate here.
Yeah.
The Cowboys have been looking for their next Ezekiel Elliott for a hot minute. Ashton Jetty could be that. I was like,
There's just not enough words to say about him because I feel like just tweeting about him or talking about him is just it's never enough because it's like he's like so good that it's kind of ridiculous that
right.
that we have to watch him for another month and a half before he even declares. So it's like you just know he's going to put up video game numbers, and it's like they know it's coming, and they still can't stop it.
Yep.
It's really I haven't seen anything like it since probably I don't know, man. Like Christian McCaffrey draft,
Yeah.
it's kind of insane.
Yeah.
Like you know the ball's going to him, and he still is reeling off 7-8 yard a carry runs and
Mm.
busting a big one in most of the game. So yeah, he's an insane talent, and I'm glad that everyone kind of is on the same accord there that he's RB1.
Dude, I mean, think about this. He had one game, I think it was versus UNLV, where he didn't have 4 yards to carry and had over 130 yards. And it was like, oh, that's a really bad game. Like, are you kidding me? 130 yards? Yeah, maybe it's on like 30 touches. But I mean, when they're stacking the box the whole time and this dude still puts up over 100 yards and we call that a bad game, it's a pretty good sign. I personally think that based on history, I know that we value the running back position lower when we're talking about this, but I mean, if you told me like, hey, the Browns are going to trade up to the end of round 1 to select a quarterback, they want to have their next Nick Chubb, I wouldn't be unbelievably shocked if they ended up going after Ashton Genty. They're a team that's notoriously very run heavy.
Yeah.
And if you told me that there are some other teams that end up, let's just say the draft order changes, that are in the top 10, I don't think it's out of the blue for him to go there. I mean, Bijan went 8. The
Yeah.
line said they're going to take freaking Jameer at 6. So it's like, I mean, the sky's the limit for Genty, if I'm going to be honest, but certainly interesting to think about.
Yeah, I'm looking here at 14 here with the Colts,
Yeah.
and this one is a little bit harder than I thought it would be. Just because
You've had 2 pause moments in the past 5 minutes, Devin.
yeah, I know. It's been tough, man, because you see who's there available on the board, and it's
Right. At least they have some corner talent,
yeah,
technically,
they,
if
they
you
have
want
some
to force
foreign
that.
talent here. It's been like a position they've dove into a bunch though
True.
already. Um,
Let me ask you this while you think, just to give you some time to process as well. How deep are you into the corner class? Like, have you studied Davison Igbinosun and Azariah Thomas? Those are 2 of my guys. So if you have, then I would love to hear your thoughts on them. If you haven't, that's perfectly reasonable because no one should be studying Davison Igbinosun and Azariah Thomas at this point.
yeah, I have not seen Thomas, but I have seen how do you say his name is again?
Igbinosun. I ended up calling it Igbinosun, but
Mhm.
don't go to me for pronunciations. I'm copying the announcers on that one.
Yeah, and this is a Ohio State corner, right?
Right. He's
Yeah,
number 1 on Ohio
yeah,
State.
he's our best corner
He's
this year.
physical as hell, dude.
Yeah, he's our best corner this year. I think
Yep.
Denzel Burke has had some issues in one-on-one situations.
Right.
So I would say I'm probably a little bit higher. I could see end of the first round for
Yeah.
Imenosa.
Yeah.
I think he's really good. But after much deliberation, I think I'm gonna take Savon Ravel here for the Colts. Um, They bet on this type of athlete before, but
Mm,
I think it's different with Ravel. Like
mm,
small sample size this year, but he's a guy that's just going to make plays on the football,
yeah,
and I think in a cornerback room that has kind of been a revolving door for Indianapolis. They've had injuries, obviously, to like Juju Brents and some of
right.
their other secondary. So he'll probably factor in, but I think you got to keep drafting it till you get it right.
Yeah,
And like they desperately need more defensive help, especially in that secondary. It's been bad. Obviously linebacker is a need for them, but you're not going to take a linebacker in round one, especially in
right.
this class. But
Yeah,
I wasn't going to take another edge rusher at 14. They took Latu last year,
right.
so I think corner makes sense here.
For sure. I will say I'm gonna roll the dice here. I'm gonna make a prediction. The next seventh round corner that starts for the Colts in the future, Jason Marshall Jr. I'm just gonna call it. He has
I
that very similar zone IQ that they look for. So I think that that's something they might roll the dice on because he's out for the year now with a shoulder injury. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did.
That broke my soul. I'm like, really? Come on,
Yeah,
man.
there's
But
been a number of guys that just
how
season-ending injuries or
ridiculous.
significant injuries. I feel like more
Right.
so, especially in a class like you're kind of looking for that next guy. And
It's like, please, for the love of God, stop getting hurt. And then, of course, I got in my car crash, and everyone's like, "Dude, this guy's joining all of these draft prospects." I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me!" I'm like, "Guys, can we give it like 24 hours before you start
yeah,
roasting me like that?" But James Pierce is gonna be my quick selection here
yeah,
for the Buccaneers. He's my number 2 player in the class, someone who I was a little bit more skeptical at the start of the year, but he's really turned it on as of late. I mean, he ended up pushing one of my favorite centers in the draft, Jake Slaughter. He drove him almost into the quarterback. I mean, 242 pounds might sound light, but similar to Dallas Turner, this guy plays he's like 255. He does have a much stronger presence to him. And I love that to death. It perfectly replaces Joe Tryon Shoyinka and, kind of a match made in heaven.
yeah. I think he's a guy that people were starting to come back around on.
Right.
He kind of have a slow start to start the season,
Mm.
but he's really turned on the last few weeks, and he's been really really impressive. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely on board with that. I think right now, between him, I think right now is Carter, Scourton, and Pierce right
Right.
now is the
Agreed.
guys I think are for sure. You feel good about
Yeah.
a couple of the guys there on the edge are a little bit more wild card type, but I
Mm.
can certainly get behind it.
All right.
Um, all right, Seattle here at 16. Um, I
It's not
think
easy.
that it was probably going to be defensive pick here,
Mm.
and I know they have continuously added to their edge rushing room,
Right.
but I want to take another edge for them.
Okay. I think that's fair. I mean, it's a defensive coach. I would
Yeah,
say that defensively, it would make sense to focus on that.
yeah. So I'm gonna go LT Overton here from Bama at 16.
Ooh.
Um, I really really like what I saw from him. I got to go to the Alabama Wisconsin game earlier this year, and I didn't know much about him except he was an A&M transfer and
Mhm.
big player, but he is so damn explosive at his
Yeah.
size, and I could see him playing multiple alignments on Seattle's defensive front, which really appealed to me. Um,
Mm.
and I could see him being reduced down, in pass rush situations, let him win against guards. But I could also see him be a guy that maybe you want to bump out on pass rush situations as well. He can
Yeah.
run an outside track, heavy handed,
Mm.
can really push the pocket. So I really like what LT Overton brings, and uh, yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen edge to the Seahawks in the first, and I love it. I really do. It's like definitely up there with the Seattle philosophy to draft these massive edge rushers, especially the ones who are taking big steps up. You think about Boye Mafe in that final season. I mean, again, new head coach and all, but like in that final season, he took a big step up. It is a defensive philosophy for Seattle to be able to generate pressure from freak athletes, even if they're not fully polished, because I mean, it's not LT Overton's fault, but I think we've consistently seen Texas A&M not properly develop players as much as what they actually can be. We were seeing that this year with Overton as well as Walter Nolan. But at number 17 for the Niners, I am actually going to look at a Texas A&M player here in Nick Scorton. I think across from Nick Bosa, they've been kind of Frankensteining the position. You look at the free agency signings, they're kind of basically making sure that the guys are, at least the positions, filled. And I think that it should be filled with excellence, not with kind of competence, like we were talking about earlier. And it's Nick Scorton and Michael Williams. I think that you can't go really wrong. Do you want to take the higher floor player or do you want to take the higher ceiling? I think sometimes since we've seen the organization look to kind of like make sure that the position's at least filled, they're going to value that base level competency with that ceiling that Scorton can bring at 285.
Yeah, I can get on board with that for sure.
Cam Williams was my other selection for the record, but
yeah, here with the Bears, I'm gonna go Tyler Booker here. I see a need in the interior for the Bears specifically. I think Tevin Jenkins is an answer at left guard for them. And they just need, I feel like they need a guy that can plug and play in the interior. And
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit, like I see the guys that are still on there. I also thought about going the receiver route and adding another receiver, as Keenan Allen obviously is a little bit older. Luther Burden was on my mind, but I think you need to shore up that interior of the offensive line. That's been a big issue for them this year in protecting Caleb Williams. And I think there's a big gap between Booker and the next available guy.
Right.
At guard specifically. Like you can take some tackle to guard converts, but I think if you're looking for a guy that can play right now and give you a really high floor and be a consistent mover in the run game, I think you take him here at 18.
For sure. I mean, Tyler Booker's a fantastic player. I mean, statistically, you look at the PFF grades, he hasn't been flawless this year by any stretch of the imagination, but that's where, the eyeballs come into account over just the statistics. Is why, people who are analysts exist, because numbers don't exactly mean everything. They're always a good guide. But for the Cardinals, I see that by their next pick, we might still have some good defensive interiors on the board, right? I think defensive interior, edge rusher are the two positions I value the most for the Cardinals in terms of return on investment. And when you think about Gannon, obviously defensive coach, but I do think there's probably going to be TJ Sanders there. You might even have a Tyleik Williams there, or potentially a Derek Harmon, ? But you have potential options there. At edge rusher, I think it's a far larger need that they've needed to continue to put a significant amount of capital into that. I sense that you and I both love edge a lot. And there's a lot of teams towards the end of the first round that will be continuing to poach edge. So I think that we need to draft the more valuable position in this case. However, I'm going to take a little bit of a more unique route. I'm going to go after a Hassan Reddick style player here and Jalen Walker. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. He's top 10 player for me easily. But if you want to use him as a linebacker, screw it, do it. Also, team that drafted Hassan Reddick, but you can use him as a pure edge rusher. You use him as a pure linebacker. I think he's well deserving of that first round pick.
Yeah, I don't dislike the pick at all. I think it'll be an interesting conversation during the draft season on where exactly is he going to play at the NFL level. Just because like some people see him as a full-time edge player, some others see him more as a off-ball linebacker. So like, I think that will be a big determinant of like how high he goes. Like if you're just going to put him at edge, obviously they're going to take him a little bit earlier than off ball. But he's a guy that, I mean, they just need, I've used this a couple of times, but they need dudes on that defensive line. They just don't have anything pass rush wise. So anything is an upgrade there.
For sure. I mean, he's also he's like 6'2", 245. It sounds like it's certainly on the lighter side, but if you look at the edge rushers they've drafted, B.J. Ojolari, Xavier Thomas, those are 245-pound players. So it's not outside of the realm of what fits their system and what they look for as well. And my vision for Jalen is to be that full-time edge rusher for him.
I can't believe that he's made it here to 20, but McMillan here for Arizona. I gotta take him for
Yeah.
the Chargers.
T-Mac.
This is like, I don't want to say this is like a no brainer, but this is like one that just makes so much sense for some of the struggles the Chargers have had this year.
Mhm.
Like, obviously, I think they do need a little bit more separators. Obviously, Lad McConkey brings that ability, and
Right.
McMillan's not really a big separator. But
Mhm.
if you're going to be a big body guy and you can make those catches downfield and the type of passes that Justin Herbert likes to throw, he likes to throw into coverage, likes to give his guys a chance. That's
Right.
where McMillan excels, especially. You can also kind of move him around, use him in a big slot role. I think he's just going to be a valuable guy that, if you don't take tight end here, obviously a lot of people see the connection with Michigan and think, Colston Loveland is a potential guy here for the Chargers, but I think McMillan's on the board. You take him here.
Well, I mean, I also think that there's that added benefit that T-Mac in a straight line, he builds up speed. He is also a deep threat, and that's going to be great essentially to use him almost as a combination of that possession style receiver and also that deep threat. So you kind of get a possession receiver that is Jalen Guyton, the way that Jalen Guyton was used in those years where Jalen Guyton was actually a very prominent receiver there for him. Like, I love the idea of potentially Tetairoa McMillan breaking off a 60-yard route pretty much every single game, because you either can't guard him or he blows past you. It's super weird. It just, hopefully the offensive line holds up and stays healthy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
at
that
20,
that that was obviously a secondary pick here, but just with who's on the board now, I think
right.
I'm just comfortable where you're at.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're not going to be missing on Tetairoa McMillan. Knock on wood. All right. we had this last time the Chargers picked a first round receiver, but for the Falcons, I think especially with trading for Judon, they've communicated the need for an edge rusher. Whether Mikael Williams is ready or not, question mark. But if you can bring back Judon for a year and train a very raw but insanely high ceiling prospect in Williams, I don't think that you can miss on that pick. I mean, you can, but the probability is just so much less. You're setting yourself up for a lot of success there.
Yeah, for sure. Here at with the Broncos,
Mm,
I think there's a couple ways you can go here. Obviously, their receiver room is just
kind of
not
mid.
great collectively.
Yeah,
So obviously receivers is an option here, especially with Luther Burden on the board, especially and Isaiah Bond, frankly.
sure.
Um, so that's an option, but I'm gonna take Emeka Egbuka because
Mm,
they need a guy that is consistent, a guy that can win in multiple alignments, and just someone that can be a go-to receiver for Bo Nix. I don't
right,
think they have that right now in their offense. Like Cortland Sutton is a guy, but Troy Franklin hasn't quite come along as you will like so far in his
right,
rookie campaign. And I just think they're in need of more of a possession style receiver. Sean Payton's offenses thrive better when there's a guy that they can go to on third
right,
downs, have the kind of that dependent. We saw with Michael Thomas, you saw with Marcus Colson. So I
right.
think Egbuka makes a lot of sense here. And over a guy like a Luther Burn or Isaiah Bond, but I see those guys as more, um, you know, probably especially with Burden, probably more of a slot receiver type, and
Sure.
then um, you look at the other receiver there as well.
Yeah, with Bond.
He's more of a vertical threat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like Bond is going to be very much a role overlap with a lot of the guys they already have on roster. Emeka Ibuka and Luther Burden, to me, I both love, especially because the after the catchability is phenomenal. It allows them to keep the offense in rhythm. I think that's something that has allowed Bo Nix to really thrive, is the fact that they could end up having those quicker throws that allow him to also then be able to feel comfortable taking the deeper shots without being, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15, etc. At pick 23 for the Ravens, I'm almost wanting to just be ballsy as hell and just go after Kenneth Grant here, just because they're a team that is willing to just get a little bit down and dirty, so to speak. However, I'm going to opt out of that. I think that this is a squad that also can be looking at an edge rusher. I know it's kind of crazy, but I'm looking at Kamen Rucker here, and it gets me excited. He had obviously that injury, ended up having a little bit of a slow comeback, but this past week, 93 defensive grade, versus Virginia. We all know, like, oh, it's like very scary. But Kamen Rucker, you and I both love this guy.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on going after edge? Even though, yes, we both love offensive line. What are your thoughts on going edge for the Ravens here at 23?
Yeah, I think you continue to go back to the well and try to continue to get difference makers. I think
Yeah.
they're clearly a team that has a Super Bowl window right now, right?
Hmm.
Like they're starting to, obviously they made the trade for Deontay Johnson, which I
Right.
think is going to be a huge boost for the receiver room. But you also look at what the play they've been able to get, from a rookie like Roger Rosengard,
Right.
and some of the things they've been able to do defensively. So yeah, I think edge or corner here are probably the areas that I would look to. I know they took Nate Wiggins last year, but
Right.
is Marlon Humphrey still that guy? Like you, but
We
you look at
continue as well. Yeah.
yeah, you look at edge though. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like they have a lot of older guys, like they
Right.
have Ngakwe, they have Kyle Van Noy. So
Hmm.
they're kindly pushing in the chips a little bit there and getting some veteran edge rushers. So I think getting some youth in there to continue to add to it and build. And they're a team that I think are similar to the Eagles who pick next. That
Yeah.
they like to be stacked at like the edge rusher room. Like
Yeah.
they want to have multiple biases throw at you. So I think with Kamen Rucker, he's a guy like Alar that is made for the AFC North. Like just
They're
like
gritty, dude. They're
yeah,
gritty dudes, man.
just a guy
Oh,
that he's just gonna get it done. Like
yeah.
he's not the flashiest or most athletic guy there, but he knows how to rush the passer, and I think that's valuable in an NFL draft class.
Sure. I would say Luther Burden if they don't bring back Deontay Johnson. Like my comp for Luther Burden kind of is Deontay, but yeah, I mean Kamen Rucker, that's the instant value push right there that I think the Ravens are going to value because they haven't really had a noticeable top tier edge rusher outside of the guys who they continue to just bring in and patch fill.
For sure.
This is your team,
Um,
man. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are like, all right, where are they gonna go here? Um, this one is difficult, but I think Cam Williams goes here in Philly. And I guess I'll explain the reasoning a little bit. Like they have been kind of like considering over the last couple of years and taking the future right tackle
Right.
for Lane Johnson. He's still playing at elite level at his age.
Right.
I think Cam Williams is a guy that the NFL is going to love, and
Mhm.
they're going to really be enamored with his size and his movement
Right.
ability. But I think, like more than anything, he's a guy that you know I think he could cut down some of his weight,
Right.
and you pair him up with one of the better offensive line coaches in Stoutland.
Stout you.
You don't need to start him immediately.
Right.
You give him some time to develop. And I just think right now with how the board has shaken
Yep.
out, Edge kind of
Depleted for the most part.
yeah, like I just don't feel comfortable taking, Jack Sawyer here
Right.
or, you know, Ezaraku or,
Right.
Princely Umani Melon.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this is a spot that is a trade out spot for one, but two, I think you take a guy that they've remained committed to building in the trenches.
Yeah.
And I say if Michael Williams was here, I probably would took him for
Yeah.
Philly, but I think Cam Williams is a pick here, developmental tackle that you get some time to develop. And you just look at the roster spots right now, they have filled a lot of the holes that you were looking at last year.
Right.
Like Quinion has come in and played really well. Cooper DeJean has come in and played really well.
Right.
I think the edge rushing room could still use more help.
Value.
But yeah, like you said, the value isn't there right now.
Mhm.
Uh, Even the defensive tackle line room, like Kenneth Grant is definitely was enticing there, but I just think development
That's
wise,
crazy. Yeah.
you get a guy like Cam Williams in the building, and
Right.
you figure out, like you have Mekhi Becton. It's like a perfect trial run right now. They have Mekhi Becton, who I think Cam Williams reminds me a lot of uh,
Mm,
in terms of his profile. And you've seen what he's been able to do, even though he's been out with a concussion.
right.
He's played really well at guard. So I think this is. I said it for a couple of years, but I think this is the year Philly actually pulls a trigger on a potential developmental guy.
Okay. I mean, I definitely can see it happening. It's not out of the realm of possibility for Philly to go and draft somebody who's extremely high ceiling for pretty much the future rather than just the present. And especially when you get a player like Cam Williams, who I think should return. He's so young, first year starting, and then could probably be a top 5 pick, top 10 pick next year. It's definitely worth it. You're pretty much investing in somebody that you're getting a top 5 player at 24 just because if he does come out, he decided to come out a year early. But at 25 for the Steelers, it's very enticing to go after Luther Burden. However, the slot, we got to give Roman Wilson a chance to actually play football. It's my team, if you can't tell. Isaiah Bond would be the wide receiver I'd be considering right now as someone who I trust on the boundary. That being said, I don't trust our offense to truly be that vertical. Like, just right now, Arthur Smith does not have any sort of indication outside of Calvin Austin that we're really going to be pushing it down the field with this specific archetype of receiver. And if Calvin Austin can stay healthy, we could essentially save a first round pick and utilize it in an area that maybe is going to be more beneficial. And when you look at the history of the Steelers, what are our most impact receivers? You look at Antonio Brown, you look at Hines Ward, you look pretty much anywhere, George Pickens, even Juju for that matter. Juju was awesome before, obviously, he had those injuries and such, but all of them have not been in the first round. I think I'm going to trust that you need to stick to your team's strengths. Don't force a position just because it's a need if you know your team has a very strong capability of getting it for much better value later. The one thing the Steelers have not been able to do, and it's the reason why we have 2 veteran quarterbacks right now on 1-year contracts, is actually land the quarterback position since Big Ben. And why not go for someone who's built for the AFC North, who's 20 years old? You can bring back Russ for a year. Oh, I saw the smile. Drew Allar, man. You guys, that's my guy. That's my guy. It's my QB2 right now. He might need a year extra to develop, but he's someone who has proven work ethic and has proven to improve every single year. If you let that trend continue, that's an AFC starting quarterback, and that potentially is somebody who could be even up there with the top of the year, the top of the entire NFL.
Yeah, once I heard the conversation shift, I was like, all right, he's gonna go Allar.
Yeah.
Um,
I was foreshadowing it from the beginning. I was like,
yeah,
man. I was
yeah,
like,
no, I mean the way, especially the way that the Steelers' offense is run right now, like
mhm,
I don't want to say it's similar to what Kotelnicki is doing at Penn
mm,
State, but
right.
it's a lot of like building on concepts. A lot of like play action, for example, a lot of like on the move, like trying to get the ball out quick, trying to move the pocket. Like there a lot of creativity with it. So I could get on board
Well, if
with
I'm going to be real here, if you look at Drew's receiving core, he has Tyler Warren and then some guys. It's
yeah.
not like Drew has a fully loaded receiving core. So he is used to kind of utilizing 1 or 2 specific targets and being able to spread it around with guys who aren't necessarily elite weapons. So I do think he also can fit quicker than maybe some of the other quarterbacks that have competitive advantages in the receiving cores.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We are here at 26 with the Vikings. I'm gonna go Kenneth Grant. I just think at
You got
this
to pull the
point,
trigger.
like
You can't say no. Like
yeah,
it's too good. It's too good.
yeah.
Tell
Like
Flores
corner
no.
was definitely another option
Right.
for sure,
Yeah.
but I think it it just made too much sense to not go after a guy like Kenneth Grant that can bring value to the defensive line, which I think is an area of improvement for Minnesota.
Yeah.
Like I think they need some more guys that can create an internal disruption and get younger at that position in general.
Right. And for the Bills, I think that, Amari Cooper might just be a short-term rental, right? He's a talented receiver, but receivers cost a shit ton of money. And if you're at 27, you have Isaiah Bond. that is another young receiver on a relatively cheap contract for an extended period of time that can provide almost the exact same benefits that Amari Cooper has. He's someone who is a boundary receiver who has really solid route running ability, but also can run in the 4.3s, if not the 4.2s. That's going to be someone who can utilize Josh Allen's arm and continue to expand the role of the offense.
Yeah, I love the pick.
Yeah,
You can. I mean, I think feel like last couple years we've been doing this with Buffalo, but I mean, they just need more difference makers.
they
Like
do.
Keon Coleman is starting to come along, which is
Yep.
good to see. But outside of that, it just hasn't been consistent. Like obviously, you got
Right.
Dawson Knox and
You got
Dalton
Shakir.
Kincaid that have been
Yeah.
great for Buffalo as well, but it just hasn't been a year you would expect from Buffalo. Obviously, losing Stephon Diggs, but they just haven't filled that void
Right.
completely. They also
Right.
lost Gabe Davis, so
Mm.
it's going to take a little bit for them to really recalibrate and get back to what you expect them to be.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, Packers here at 28. I know there are another fan base that's very particular about who they pick and want to pick. Um, so I think right now, like I don't love what's available at tackle
Sure.
on the board currently. So I'm going to go to corner,
Mm.
and there's a couple guys here that could be interesting selections.
Okay.
So we talked about Morrison a little bit earlier. I
Right.
think he's in play here.
Yep.
I think are other Ohio State corners in play here too.
Right.
Um, which I don't even know if he's in the
He's
sim.
not.
So,
I take Jordan Hancock every time. Like everybody
yeah.
knows Igbenos is Hancock at this point.
I would say just for the sake of him not being in here, I'm gonna go a different route. I'm gonna go Takario Davis from
Ooh.
Arizona. Um,
Okay.
I like his length. I like what he can do um, in disrupting in causing disruption in pass routes. How physical he can be at the
Mm.
line of scrimmage.
Right.
I do think you're going to run into, all right, he's a big corner, so he's not going to move as fluidly
Right.
in and out of breaks. But I think his ball skills and ability to be sticky in man coverage
Right.
particularly stand out. And I just look at what Green Bay has right now. I mean, they got Jair Alexander, and I think the other corner spot is in an area they need to
Sure.
improve.
Yeah.
And I think they're another team that you're looking at like, okay, this can be a team for a while. They have a young receiving core, offensive line they've poured a lot of resources into.
Right.
Um, and I think Jordan Morgan is going to continue to become a factor along their offensive line.
For
So
sure.
like I think they're set up for the long term here on the offensive side of the ball, and you just need a few pieces defensively. I'll
Yeah.
also look at linebacker, but again, this is the linebacker class isn't we're taking a guy in the first round, but
Right.
I like Takario Davis there.
Okay. Well, for the Commanders, I'm going to run this up to the podium. Even with a hip injury out for the year, I'm going to take Ben Morrison. Just getting more quality defensive backs is always going to be beneficial for any team. And, I still love Ben Morrison. I know that he was relatively underwhelming this year. But again, everybody, for some reason, a lot of people have been having just a down year this year. So I'm going to trust that he's going to bounce back.
All right, here at let's see, 30 with the Texans. I mean, the glaring need here is interior offensive line. Like
Yeah.
they are getting pretty badly beat up
Black.
here. So this one I'm gonna go. Do we have Jonah Savanea in here
They
in the mind?
do. They haven't
At
listed as a
tackle?
tackle, but I love the idea of kicking him inside.
Yep, that's my thought process here.
Mm.
Take him here at 30. You move him inside, and I think he's a guy that I would like to see kind of be inserted. I just think they really struggle with interior pressure. He's been really, really good this year in pass protection and being able to handle speed rushers on at tackle. So I could totally see a team taking him and wanting to keep him at tackle. But
Yeah.
I like what he can bring as a potential guard at the next level.
For
If I'm
sure.
not mistaken, I think he played some guard early in his career
Yeah, I've
for
heard some
Arizona.
center flexibility too. I think he might have played some center in high school. Like, I remember hearing, NFL Stock Exchange talk about that.
Yeah. So I think he's a guy that the he's played interior, played at tackle, and
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see how teams kind of view him throughout the process. But
Right.
I really like his skill set and what he brings to the table.
All right. Well, for the Lions, I think that this is the prime opportunity to go and get the edge number 2 across from Aiden Hutchinson, who hopefully will come back as awesome as he was from that horrific injury. I don't know where you're at with JT Tuimoloau. For me, I honestly love how much he's developed this year. I think he's done a fantastic job, but it's almost impossible to deny Shamar Stewart, who is probably the freakiest athlete I've ever studied at 290. Definitely the freakiest at 290, but one of the freakiest pound for pound that I've ever seen. And I don't think the Lions need someone who's a genuine, proven, instant impact. I think they want to have someone there for the long run to be a dynamic duo with Hutchinson. And if you're going to try to do that, I think Shamar Stewart's your guy.
Yeah, I'd love the pick here. I mean, Detroit is really done some great things in the draft recently, but
Yeah.
getting a guy of that caliber can play, hand in the dirt, can be
Mhm.
an outside pass rusher. You can really have some flexibility, move him across the line.
Yep.
I'd love the pick. He feels like a guy that the Lions would really like in this draft process and really enjoy seeing him develop. So
Yeah.
um, I'll go with that. All right, 32 here with the Kansas City Chiefs. Kind of
Who's the
talking about
first?
the tackle class, not really loving it, but I'm gonna go a little rogue here. My tight end one, and I'm gonna go Tyler Warren
I
for
literally knew it. I was like, that's like,
yeah,
you said my
like
tight end one. I'm like, that's not rogue. That's just
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
He's a baller.
I love what Tyler Warren has done this year and how creative they gotten with getting him the football. I mean,
Right.
he's a guy that can play in the slot, can play in line, has played fullback in his career, quarterback. I mean, he used to
He's
play
crazy.
quarterback in high school. So it's like I can't think of a guy that's much more tailored for Andy Reid's system than Tyler
It's
Warren.
going to be awesome. I would love to see that. But that's going to be the video. Devin, thank you for coming on. Those of you guys, thank you for watching. Devin, feel free to say goodbye to the people.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on again. You can follow me on X at reald_Jackson. Post a lot of clips and films here. Got a preview in the morning dropping on Penn State, Ohio State tomorrow. So excited for that game. A lot of prospects in that one, and looking forward to watching that. And probably a game that we'll be talking about a lot this year.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be super exciting. Thank you guys so much for watching. We love you. See you on the far side. Peace.